Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Was Adopted by Midnight Part 3. Izuku meets All Might group trip to zoo. Hey, mom. Why are we going to UA? Does Nedzu want to talk about my analysis again? Are we going to train? Namuri shook her head no, not today. I am going to talk to the principal about a new job opening that I was interested in taking. There is a teaching spot open, so I was going to meet with him to discuss it. You're going to work at UA? Izuku asked as the two entered the front doors of the school. If the meeting goes well, I will be roaming these halls of UA as a new teacher. I heard it either had some to do with history or art, Namuri said as she walked with him down the familiar walls of UA. And while the meeting goes on, I want you to go to Recovery Girl's office for her to watch over you. Izuku nods back at her. Okay, got it. Ooh, maybe I can ask for some candy, since she always has some to spare, Izuku thought to himself as he rushed in the direction of Recovery Girl's office. Izuku practically skipped down the hall towards the nurse's office. Once he arrived, he rested his hands on the door to push it open. Ashinori, this is getting ridiculous, you are way too reckless, especially after facing you-know-who not too long ago. You have to rest. Izuku stiffens up when he hears the familiar voice of Recovery Girl, coming from outside her office doors which are closed. He stands outside the door, careful not to make a sound because he doesn't want to intrude on the conversation. But from the can't see through the window, it looked like the number one hero was talking to the nurse from the familiar booming voice that sounded more quiet. That's what Sir Night-Eye said to me. He advised that I should retire, but I can't just leave because the people of Japan need me, All Might said before coughing into his fist. If they are still waiting for All Might, then I have to be the one there for them as their symbol of peace. Honestly, I somewhat agree with him. I don't think you have to retire if you truly don't want to. But you must at least take a break to heal properly and take better care of yourself. If you won't allow yourself to take a break, it will just make you suffer longer than needed, Recovery Girl scolded. Izuku can almost see the concerned look on her wrinkly face. Your injury has already greatly impacted your life, don't let it get even worse by you acting recklessly. But I can't rest when there is more villain that is out there. Bad people who are going to hurt the innocent when I am not around, All Might sighed. Night-Eye said he wouldn't support me as my sidekick any longer since I won't retire. All because of the future he saw with his quirk. But I have to keep protecting the people as long as I can. I want to be able to save them. I need them to know that All Might is still there for them. The door accidentally creaks open as Izuku stumbles into the entryway. Toshinori coughs up blood which causes him to freak out about him. Izuku waves his hands wildly. Are you okay, All Might? I am fine. And who might you be, young man? I'm Kayama Izuku. My mom sent me here while she talks with Principal Nedzu, Izuku answered. I heard a bit of your conversation when I was outside because I didn't want to be a rude interruption while you two were talking. Oh, that is perfectly fine since All Might will be staying in this office for a bit longer to rest. All Might stiffened at her strict gaze. Did he push himself as Uncles Ashi and Uncles Awa do? Izuku asked Recovery Girl. The pro-hero nurse nodded back at him, yes, and even worse. But he can't get it through his stubborn head that he needs to take a rest once in a while, especially now. All Might, did you get hurt? Was it toxic chainsaw? Wait, why aren't you resting? Izuku started to ramble, accidentally causing the houseplant behind him to float upwards. He immediately noticed and gently placed it back on the ground. Oops, sorry. I am still working on that. The pro-hero waved off the young boy's worries, yes, but it is nothing to worry about. I'll get better soon in no time so I can get back to the streets and, All Might. Can you answer a question for me? All Might questioned back at the young boy, yes. What might it be that you wish to ask me? An autograph. Are you human? Izuku asked. Yes, so you admit you are human. So you aren't some heavenly god who can't just regenerate or heal yourself back in no time. So you aren't some immortal being that can go eons without dying at all, Izuku calmly replied. All Might look around, what is this leading to? Well, I don't like to see people push themselves too hard. I saw it with my mom when she came back from a harsh fight with a severe case of quirk exhaustion. My uncle lost his voice for an entire week because he kept pushing himself during a patrol. I see it dozens of times in hero fights on the news and online, and I hate to watch someone suffer because they don't think that they can take a break. Izuku paused while All Might started to look a bit guilty. All Might, you might be the symbol of peace. But you are still a human being that needs to take care of yourself. There are other heroes out there that will support the public when you are resting and heroes that will support you when you come back onto the field. For now, just take a break. All Might grinned, thank you for your kind words, young man. And I'll make sure he continued to rest. You might want to get ready, I think that Nedzu is done talking with Midnight already, Recovery Girl said. Midnight? Recovery Girl toddled her head, didn't you know? Midnight is his mother. All Might smiled, oh my goodness. I almost forgot, but now I remember because of that interview all those years ago. The three continued to talk for a little bit longer until Midnight stopped by to pick up her son. Izuku didn't leave without an autograph from All Might. All Might also say something to Midnight about how she has raised such a kind boy. After the interview, Namuri took Izuku with her to the zoo to meet up with his uncle and his cousin. She waved happily when she saw her longtime friends, which were accompanied by Izuku's excited scream at seeing them. "Uncles, assy uncles, Awa Hito-chan," Izuku cried out, almost dragging Namuri by their joined hands to run to them. After deeming it safe, she let go for Izuku to run into the long-awaiting arms of Hisashi. Hisashi picked Izuku up off the ground to swing him around once before setting him back down on the ground. Izuku laughed before latching onto his other uncle, who returned his embrace. "Ah, little listener, how have you been? I heard you protected your mom when she went to talk to Nedzu today." "Yeah, and I met All Might," Izuku replied before attacking Hitachi into a softer hug. "Wow," Hitachi commented while he patted Izuku's back. He pushed his cousin back a small bit to look at his face to get more details from him. "What happened? Why was he there?" Hisashi asked, confused as to why the number one hero was at UA. "He was meeting with Recovery Girl to talk about something," Namuri said before leaning in to whisper. "I think Izuku melted his defenses a little bit. Let me guess. Like any other reckless hero, he was pushing himself too much and then Izuku helped him out," as always stated without any hesitance in his tone. When Namuri nodded, he sighed. "Of course. That makes sense," Hitachi responded with a nod. Namuri tilted her head towards the awaiting ticket center at the front. "Shouldn't we start heading in?" "Yeah. Man, it's been a while since we've come here. And now we are all here together bonding," Hisashi exclaimed, ruffling Hitachi and Izuku's hair. "Yeah, I wanted to see the insectarium, but then I remember that Papa is a scaredy cat around bugs," Hitachi commented to his cousin. Hisashi pouted, "I'm not a scaredy cat, I have faced against some of the worst villains out there. And yet, as soon as you saw a cockroach, you are running for the hills while I'm the one who was to get rid of it," as always said back to him, while Namuri nodded. "Chowda, they are terrifying. Bugs are terrifying. Have you seen their little itty-bitty faces with their fangs? They could kill me with one bite or sting. They could kill you," Hisashi argued loudly. "This is irrational fear," as always sighed. "Okay, Hisashi. Let's just get in here fast before even more people decide that today is the perfect day to visit the zoo. I don't want to be surrounded by so many screaming children." But thankfully, the loud children around them didn't bother Awa as much as it would seem, since there weren't many children around the time. Most of them were already heading home when they went inside. The group decided to just do a loop around the zoo to visit all of the exhibits. When they went to the reptile section, Hitachi had a long staring contest with a snake until Hitachi finally blinked to relieve his eyes. Hisashi ended up jumping when he saw a bug inside one of the reptile's habitats, only to jump again when the snake leaped out to eat the bug. Azawa dragged him away by his jacket for him not to get freaked out again, since he doesn't want to erase his quirk each time. The bird exhibit was easily Azawa's least favorite and Hisashi's most favorite out of everything. Izuku started to laugh when the bird started to mock the same sounds that Hisashi was making. Namuri liked the seals in the water habitat because of the way they just flopped around on land. And Izuku liked the penguins because it reminded him of Shoto's quirk and how Iida would act sometimes. When he saw a penguin flap their wing, he was instantly reminded of his friend. Until they finally came to the last spot that they all wanted to see. Izuku cheered, "The elephants." "Yep, I wonder if Suzy is around," Azawa commented underneath his scarf. Hisashi looked around the exhibit before pointing, "Oh, there she is, wow, she sure grew a lot, wow." "Hito-chan, look, it's Suzy the elephant," Izuku pointed out happily to his cousin who was staring at the huge animals. "She looks so big," Hitachi commented. And it was true. Suzy had grown over the last years since Izuku had first seen her. It was like the elephant grew with him almost. They had both lost their mothers, but they both grew up with the love of their new family. Namuri looked at the plaque in front of the exhibit to see who was who. She had quickly spotted Luis, who was making sure Suzy had taken some of the hay that they were given. And that was the end of their zoo trip altogether. Well, almost. Izuku had dragged Hitachi towards the gift shop, which made the three adults follow after them. They ended up following the two with Izuku excitedly pointing out the stuffed animals inside to his cousin. Hisashi watched as Hitachi picks up a purple cat with a lion mane the same color as his hair. Hisashi ended up smiling while wrapping a long snake plush around Hitachi's shoulders, which he enjoyed very much. Izuku gets a smaller elephant plush to match the one he got the last time he visited the zoo with his uncles. Namuri got herself a little keychain of a panther to add to her keys. Hisashi ended up with a bright bird plushie perched on his shoulder while holding a Grim Reaper plushie for Azawa in his hands. They all paid for the little gifts from the shop before finally exiting the zoo. "What do you guys feel like for dinner?" "I got it covered," Namuri offered while fiddling with her keychain ring. Momo and Izuku Day. Midnight was called on a quirk trafficking ring case dealing with mutation quirks with Eraserhead. So she wasn't able to watch over Izuku during the case since it was very important and time sensitive. To remedy this, President Mick agreed to watch over him mostly, and his friends had separate days that they could hang out with him during the afternoon leading into a sleepover. Thankfully, Samae declared a long weekend because of a quirk incident that happened nearby with a villain. So the school has to get fumigated because of the gas that covered the school before any of the students can return. Momo called the first night because she was so excited to show him the new teas that her parents had gotten during their latest travel to Europe. Then both of the Iida brothers would take the second day to bring him to the new exhibit at the Museum of Heroes. The third night would be more like a whole day since it was a day off of school where Shoto and his siblings would bring him along to check out a water park. The fourth night would just be a regular babysitting night with Mick and Shinso. Finally, Kitsuki is saved for last because of the saying best for last. He said he has something special planned that he won't tell him because it's a secret. So here he was on the first night at Momo's house after Uncle Mick had dropped him off with his stuff for the night and also for school the next day. Mick had already dropped him off to head off to his radio show early. Her maid had answered the door with an excited Momo behind her. "You're here." Izuku smiled with his hands on his hips. "I am here. Follow me." "Oh, goodbye Mr. President Mick." Momo waved over to President Mick who was watching. Izuku waved to him right before he pulled away from the house's curved driveway. "Bye-bye, Uncle Mick," Izuku yelled out, floating a little in the air. He pulled himself to the ground before jumping into the air. "I'm so excited." "I am too. I can't wait to have my first sleepover. Ooh, let me give you a little tour before the tea party." Momo pulled him inside by his hand. Yayoi Rozu's maid closed the front door right as they made it inside before going back to dust off the walls. Momo had guided him through her house with her nanny following a bit behind to make sure she didn't get hurt in any way under her watch. She detailed the big kitchen they had with talented cooks on their staff. The countertops were a stunning marble that worked well with the stainless steel and silver appliances that the cooks were working with. The dark wooden cabinets matched well with the kitchen decor like the hanging chandelier over the island where a fruit bowl was placed. The family room had multiple couches that crowded around a skinny table that had a flower arrangement inside a glass vase. On the wall was a large television screen that was placed above a fireplace filled with framed photographs of family vacations. The intricate rug that was underneath the couches tied the room all together. The dining room was a room with a long deep mahogany table that could fit up to 20 people at the table, maybe even more from how long it was. And at the other side of the room was a grand piano that was perfect if the guests wanted to hear live music while they ate. The backyard of the house contained a lovely garden of flowers and produce and a blue pool. The garden was so lush and filled with life. And the pool had the covering over it placed there ahead of time to make sure leaves and other things don't fall into the pristine water. Last on the list was Momo's bedroom, which was on the second floor, which meant Izuku got to climb the grand staircase which led up to the second floor. Momo had said that the tour would stop at the second floor since she had most of it to herself if there weren't any guests. Momo's bedroom was so beautiful. Her bed was so grand with little bed curtains to shield off the mattress from the rest of the room. She had her television mounted on the wall with shelves of movies in front of it. She had two bookshelves that sat on opposite sides of the television. She had a large closet containing many outfits, shoes, and accessories. Her bathroom was a mythical mermaid theme. "I asked a cook to make some sandwiches and pastries for our tea party," Momo said, gesturing over to the well-made tray table in her room placed near the abdomen in front of her bed. The tray was decorated with many colors of pastries, with a separate tray table of small teapots, teacups with matching saucers. "So we have mini sandwiches, macarons, croissants, cookies, and scones with some lemon curd. And of course, several pots of tea for us to drink. And they have more in the kitchen if our stomachs aren't full." "Whoa, so cool," Izuku whispered as he ventured over with her to the abdomen for both of them to take a seat there. Yayoi Rozu's nanny was outside nearby if they needed anything. And at that moment, their tea party began. Momo introduced him to fancy teas that her mother had purchased in Paris. And looser tea leaves that her father had bought in the Netherlands. There were about 5 teas that were prepared just for them to enjoy during their tea party with sugar cubes in a little bowl with a tiny scoop if they wanted any in their cup. Izuku ate the sandwiches while Momo went for the scones and lemon curd at first, while they drank the teas from their cups with exaggerated sips. "What do other girls do at sleepover parties?" Momo questioned. "You don't know?" Izuku tilted his head in confusion. He remembers how well Momo got along with others in their class. A lot of their classmates looked at her and talked to her a lot when Iida and he weren't around. "I thought you had more girlfriends at school." "Well, many girls at school only ask how much I have, which makes me doubt that they care when I talk about things I like." Momo tightened her hands in the fabric of her skirt. She looked down at the dark liquid of her teacup with a sad expression. "That's why I only spend time with all of you guys. You care when I talk about the new things I learn about, don't you?" "Of course I liked when you talked about how rainbow sprinkles were made yesterday during lunch," Izuku answered honestly. "Plus I always like when you talk about the new stuff that you made with your quirk. Like the Russian doll things that you made for us last week. I forgot the name of them." Matryoshka dolls. I watched a documentary about them last week about the history behind them and how they were made. They are so easy to make with my quirk. Momo explained to him. I do wish I could get some more friends like all of you that don't care about who my family is compared to who I am. After their talk, Izuku ended up talking a bit with the maid and nanny to learn what people do during sleepovers. With his answer, he reported back to Momo to say how sleepovers depending on the group of friends. And the maid disclosed how she used to have her hair braided and watch movies with her friends. Momo coached Izuku on how to braid while he practiced on a small section of her hair. After his practice, he did a loose braid of all of her black hair with her help to hold certain sections of hair at some points. Momo had tried to braid his hair, but his curls couldn't handle the little braids she had tried to accomplish. So she ended up digging around her drawer to put her old butterfly clip into his green hair. The nanny ended up putting on one of Momo's favorite movies on the television screens in her room. They continued to eat from the tray tables filled with food and tea while they watched. Together, they both watched as the princess had invited other princesses to a massive sleepover party where they all slid down a huge slide with mattresses. Izuku hummed, "Hey, don't you have a big staircase?" "Yeah," Momo replied quickly without thinking. Izuku studied the screen for a few more moments. "Do you think it is wide enough to fit the mattress in your guest room?" "Oh, not the one in the guest room specifically," Momo looked back at the staircase in question. The carpeted wooden stairs were a few steps away from her bedroom door. "Although, our guest room does have 2 twin mattresses stuffed in the closet just in case we have more guests." They both look at each other with matching smiles. Momo's dark eyes glittering at the thought of reenacting the scene in pure excitement. Somehow the night transformed into making Momo's grand staircase into a slide for the mattresses. The nanny had made the slide stable because of Momo's help in making thin sheet metal. It took a bit of help from the staff to make a fully functioning slide that was safe to use on the stairs. "Don't worry, Ms. Merriwell, we have helmets on, and I made them extra protective," Momo replied, knocking her hand onto the hard exterior of the helmet that her maid had made them wear. "And matching pads for our elbows and knees. We'll be okay." The maid nods serenely before slowly pushing the 2 on the mattress. Both of them squeal as they slide down the staircase with 2 workers at the bottom to make sure they don't end up tumbling. Safe to say, both of them weren't hurt at all. Both of them laughed when they made it to the bottom and continued to use the slide over and over again. Izuku and Momo had even convinced some of the staff to slide down the slide as well, which was fun to watch. The maid brought down a pillow with her to use as a cushion just in case. But their night had finished early when Momo had yawned, which made Izuku yawn as well. The nanny guided them both upstairs back to Momo's grand bedroom. Izuku changed in the bathroom while Momo changed into her pajamas in her room. After everything was cleaned up, they both brushed their teeth and washed their faces to get ready for bed. And with the night stars shining down through Momo's window, they both wished goodnight to each other before falling asleep shortly after. Tenya and Izuku's day. It was the second day of their break, and Tensei had picked him up from Momo's house to drive both him and Tenya to the Pro Hero Museum. Tenya had been telling him all week about a new exhibit that the museum had opened that featured international heroes. Tensei drove in his trusted car with both boys in the backseat. Izuku looked out the window to see the buildings passing by. He turned back around to see his friend swinging his feet while retelling what happened the other day on Tensei's patrol. Tensei added in some information through Tenya's story while he drove down the street. Sooner than later, they all arrived at the Hero Museum. Tensei took a long time trying to figure out where to park his car. Once he did, both boys were bouncing in their feet to get in there to see what it looked like inside. Both of them had never been to the museum before, and they were excited to see everything including the brand new exhibit. Tensei led the way with both boys close behind him, clutching onto his shirt sleeves as they entered the museum. They had to wait in a line to pay for their tickets to get inside, but once they did. The first exhibit they walked into was highlighting the current pro heroes in Japan. It was the first thing that anyone could see when they walked into the Museum of Heroes. It was a huge ballroom-like room with tall walls and high ceiling. Each inch of it was covered in memories of current pro heroes from debut days to the biggest moment of their career so far. The centerpiece of the entire room was an All Might bronze statue, which depicted the symbol of peace in his Bronze Age costume. "Wow, look, Ten, it's All Might," Izuku gestured happily up at the stage with bright green eyes filled with admiration. His eyes widened. How many other heroes have statues? I'm pretty sure that All Might is the only one with a legit statue here. Pro heroes mostly have replicas of their debut hero costume in cases or framed pictures of events they participated in, Tensei explained, putting a hand to his chin and rubbing it in thought. He could feel a bit of stubble growing there. He continued in a more softer tone, "I think they might have the first prototype of my Ingenium helmet here somewhere." The next exhibit after the biggest one was to commemorate the heroes who give back the most and to spotlight the charities that they donate to the most. Most heroes that were in the exhibit with picture frames specialized in more rescue than combat. All Might was featured as the most generous donator to multiple charities all over Japan, as well as a few in America. He even helped funded the start of an organization that recognizes heroes from the past, no matter how popular they were, to honor their memory. He had a picture framed about 10 years earlier standing next to multiple people in a framed collage of pictures. I wonder how many charities there are, Tenya wondered out loud. There are ones that focus on animals and children and others that focus on quirks and discrimination. I know that there must be over 200 official charities in Japan alone for a fact. But maybe it would be closer to 2,000 all around the world because there are so many issues that need awareness, Tensei responded, trailing his eyes over all the names of the charities and which heroes donated to each one. Izuku found his mother, Midnight, posing with multiple women in a small collage of her giving back to charities. Most of them focused on either helping runaway children, quirk discrimination, and helping women in difficult situations. He even found present Mick in a few pictures with him donating to charities that help children with hearing problems and learning disabilities. The new exhibit they had walked into had a lot more people inside it. It had more unfamiliar faces feature on the walls. On the far walls, there was 2 screens that had a long presentation with slides about different heroes in some other countries from east to west. All 3 of them stood there for a while to watch as the presentation changed slides to show off new faces to all of them. Tensei piped up with a story about 2 of them when they came into the screen, a pro-hero duo. He apparently partnered with them once upon a time when he was younger when they came from France over to Japan. When they walked into the next room, the tone was more somber with a faded blue light illuminating the entire room. It was called the Fallen Heroes exhibit from the gold plaque that was at the side of the doorway when they walked in. A huge exhibit to recognize all the pro-heroes all over Japan that have lost their lives in battle, protecting until their last breath. Izuku surveyed the walls to read the engravings of all the names of heroes from the past, up until more modern times. The engravings contained their hero name, their civilian name, and how they died. All 3 of them stood together, silently respecting the fallen ones. Tenya looked up to his big brother's face and silently hoping that his brother gets to live a long life as a pro-hero. He hopes no one takes his big brother away from him too soon. The final exhibit was one that was a bit controversial to many when the museum announced it. But it was the most interesting exhibit in the museum. The Illegal Heroes exhibit that recognized that good things that vigilantes have done throughout the years in minor ways to major ways. It detailed how some illegal heroes have become underground heroes with new identities. It explored the true definition of a hero with quotes on the walls from both vigilantes and pro-heroes. The exhibit highlighted the morals and ideals of each vigilante that graced their wall with a shadowed version of their costume, hiding their faces. The pictures on the wall had painted them in silhouettes with their vigilante costume being the only color added to the well-done paintings. Tensei hummed, recognizing one that was wearing an All Might hoodie, Azawa, and I actually worked with some vigilantes back when both of you were younger. Izuku's eyes widened as Tensei looked back at the pictures with a reminiscing smile. Iida looked confused at his brother with a hint of betrayal. Brother, why have you not shared these stories? Ha. I can tell you both a few stories after we get out of here. Those were some wild times even if it was only a few years back, Tensei answered truthfully, scratching at the back of his neck. After a long time at the huge museum, all 3 of them got back inside the car to go to a nice place to eat to quench their hunger. Tensei ended up just picking up fast food for all of them to eat back at their home. Izuku laughed as Tensei started to serenade the entire car by singing along to whatever came on the radio. Shoto and Izuku's day. After Tenya and Tensei spent the day with him, the 4 Fire and Ice siblings wanted to have their turn since Shoto wanted to spend the entire day with his friend just like their other friends. So Iida's parents helped Fayumi set up a getaway to a water park since it was a sunny day and they wanted to enjoy it. Under the guidance of the 2 older siblings, the 3 younger boys were ready to go and have fun with the water. Before they even got out of the car, Fayumi warned Shoto and Natsuo to try not to use their ice quirks accidentally in the water. The 2 boys promised while Tuya looked mischievous in the front seat, something that Izuku noticed in the side mirror from the back seat. Natsuo ran off once they got inside straight towards the lazy river that looped around the park. Tuya goes after him to watch over him, leaving Fayumi with the more well-behaved friends. Shoto and Izuku protect her from any catcallers or people trying to flirt by pulling her away quickly from any man that tries to talk with her. The 3 of them waited in line patiently for one of the water slides. Fayumi sat on one side to balance both the boys' weight on the other side in the raft before the worker pushed them through the opening of the slide. "Boo!" Izuku shouted as they ventured into the dark tunnel of the slide. Shoto got momentarily scared when he couldn't see anything. He clutched onto the side of the raft and ended up accidentally icing the side creeping onto the bottom of the raft. Fayumi noticed how the raft went from a decently normal pace to quite a fast one as it started to slide through the tunnels faster than before. "Why are we going so fast?" Oops, Shoto commented as the raft continued on its path into a large bowl with a hole in the middle that the raft was circling towards fast. Sorry. Izuku laughed with a bright smile as the three of them circled around the exit quickly while Fayumi held onto the raft straps tightly. Once they pass through the hole, they end up going down a long water slide that splashes them right into the pool below. Shoto took the chance to warm up the ice before the workers could see. Izuku smiled at him while Fayumi checked them both to make sure they didn't scrap their knees off the bottom of the pool or sides of the tunnel or anything like that. Next time, I'll ask if the tunnel gets super dark before we ride. And if you get scared, just grab onto me or Izuku if you can reach us instead of the outside of the raft, Fayumi said as she guided both of the boys out of the pool. Izuku blocked her back and stared hard at the older teenage boy who was trying to peek at her bottoms. Natsuo was just floating down the lazy river in his inflatable tube with his face towards the sun. He raised his hand to shield his eyes from the bright rays and looked over to find his older brother laid on his stomach in a tube. He turned back around when he heard giggling to see a few girls around his age waving to him from their own tubes. He started to wave back with a smile when Tuya crept up on his tube, turning the attention towards him. He grimaced, noticing multiple teenagers, girls and boys, feasting their eyes on his brother in all his scarred and bad boy looks. The dark pinkish skin from past training that recovery girl helped heal before they turned into more serious burns. The piercings in his ears and his black hair attracted more attention to his stunning blue eyes. Natsuo crosses his arms while the group of teens floated away while Tuya paddled up closer to him. He turned towards his older brother to find out what he was doing when Tuya dunked him in the water by swiping the tube from underneath him. Tuya Natsuo whined when he came back up to the surface while his older brother snickered to himself as he floated right past him. He quickly swam up to him, dragging his inflatable behind him with a determined look across his face. He saw Tuya trying to swim up and flirt with a lady that wore a very complicated-looking swimsuit with a bunch of lines of fabric crossing over her torso. Natsuo ruins it for Tuya by swimming up close to his brother and asking loudly about the lady's swimsuit and her tan lines. The lady floated past without answering any of the questions that Natsuo threw at her, while Tuya turned to look at his brother and rolled his eyes at him. Har. Real funny, Tuya retorted as Natsuo grinned brightly at him. Tuya fixed him with a deadpan look before splashing him right across the face with the chlorine water. Natsuo coughed when some of it got into his mouth. But at Tuya's victorious smirk, Natsuo went full attack mode by using both of his arms to scoop water with his hands to make big splashes at him. Tuya snorted as he started launching the water at him in even bigger waves at him as the lazy river floated them down with a gentle stream. Fayumi was enjoying an iced lemonade in a relaxing chair as Natsuo and Tuya walked up with towels around their shoulders. Hey, where are the other two? Fayumi gestured in front of them. They both turned their heads to see where Fayumi was looking to see both of their little brothers in the very shallow waters of the wave pool that barely had any big waves coming towards them. They were both sitting down on the pool bottom, allowing the water to wash over their legs. Shoto and Izuku looked over their shoulders to wave at them happily. I sat down with my drink about 5 minutes ago because I just had to take a break from the depths of the pool. The waves got too high to jump and there were too many people. It felt like a sardine can, Fayumi explained, only pausing to take a sip of her frozen lemonade. She tilted the cup to allow Natsuo to take the cherry off the top and pop it into his mouth. So I got some snacks for all of us to eat. And now I'm just watching over them from this chair. How long ago were the snacks? About 30 minutes ago, Fayumi pushed her hair out of her eyes. How was the lazy river? Very relaxing, Tuya commented as he gestured with his head towards his younger brother next to him. I think Natsuo almost fell asleep like twice. I wasn't sleeping, Natsuo protested strongly with furrowed eyebrows. Tuya shrugged, knocking his shoulder into Natsuo's. And if he was, I woke him up with water straight to his face. I was just resting my eyes, Natsuo retorted. Fayumi smiled gently before Tuya asked for the water-protected wallet that Fayumi had around her neck for them to get something to eat as well. She gladly handed it over to her brothers. She glanced over to watch her brothers stand in line for a solid 10 minutes before they both came back with snacks of their own. Tuya got a frozen lemonade, while Natsuo settled for a soda with spicy flavored chips. Tuya clicked his cup against hers as the three older siblings relaxed back into the water park chairs to watch the two friends playing in the water. After everyone had finished with their snacks, they all tried the wave pool again away from most of the swimming crowd where the waves started. They were all just having fun in the middle of the wave pool before Tuya brought their attention to a tall slide behind them. I heard from some people on the lazy river that up to like 8 people can go in the raft and just go super fast all the way to the bottom. Oh dear. How high is it? I can tell from the stairs that it is a long way up, Natsuo pointed out, which made Fayumi look closely to see just how many flights of stairs that they would have to climb. I don't know, Fayumi began before Tuya held his hand up. Tuya's head turned around to face Shoto and Izuku. Hey, you think you two can walk all the way up those steps? Why? Shoto asked. Those stairs lead to a ride that all of us can ride at the same time, Tuya answered. Izuku looked up and down at the tall slide before nodding to himself, I can make it. Shoto glanced at Izuku and back at his siblings. He gave a short nod to Tuya which made Tuya look smug when he turned back to Fayumi. And just like that, the 5 of them were getting out of the wave pool and walking all the way to the tallest slide in the water park. The stairs were the only obstacle standing in their way since it was taking forever to climb them. It took them forever to finally get to the top where the workers were placing small families into the large circular raft and sending them down the water slide. When it was their turn, Shoto and Izuku were situated first while Tuya sat opposite them. Fayumi and Natsuo sat facing each other on opposite ends to keep the balance. With a short countdown, the workers pushed the raft which caused the raft slide effortlessly down. When the turns came, the raft moved up the side walls which caused Fayumi to squeak in surprise and make Tuya laugh at her noise in return. Natsuo whooped as the 5 of them kept spinning slowly around as the raft continued going down the slide. Izuku laughed cheerfully as Shoto clutched into the straps because he didn't want to repeat an accident like last time. Until finally, the 5 of them landed with a big splash at the bottom pool below the slide. Tuya accidentally tipped himself off the raft when they were trying to get to safety, which made Shoto smile as the rest of his siblings were laughing joyfully. Izuku was giggling at him as well before it turned into a shriek when Tuya dragged him under the water as well. And afterwards, the group of 5 continued their way through the water park to see what else it had in store for them. Hitachi and Izuku relax. After an eventful day at the big water park, Uncle Mick picked him up with Hitachi and Miku in the backseat waiting for him. Most of the day was just filled with playing with Miku and his uncle's cats. Hitachi watched some movies with him glued to his side with Miku laying across both of their legs on top of their shared blanket while the cats were lounging behind their heads on the back of the couch. For lunch, Uncle Mick picked up some takeout from the little restaurant down a few blocks from their apartment. The food was still warm when all of them dug into their tender beef and noodles. Miku managed to snag a noodle that escaped from Izuku's bowl, while one of the cats jumped on the table and escaped with a piece of beef in their mouth. Hisashi wore little under-eye patches afterwards, which made both boys want to wear a pair under their eyes as well. So for 30 minutes while they watched a show, there were little gold patches under their eyes to cool them down. Hitachi started to talk with Izuku about what happened the previous night since Hisashi took Hitachi to the radio station with him during his show. Did you get to choose some of the music? Hitachi laughed and nodded, and I made him pick the weirdest ones I could find on the playlist they had. He made so many combinations of songs that they didn't fit each other's vibe. Hisashi nodded as he tried to remember the songs that Hitachi played for the listeners. One moment it's a pop love song, and the next it was talking about death. So the listeners were thrown for a loop. Some of them called in. There was this one guy, Hitachi paused to snicker to himself. And he called in and just asked, dude, are you okay? Izuku laughed while Hisashi groaned half-heartedly in protest. I just said I was in my feelings since I couldn't really say I have my kid doing my job for me. So he just accepted that answer and hung up, Hisashi replied with a grin. I checked my social media the next morning to see just how many people were majorly confused. The comments were hilarious. Hitachi rolled his eyes, he was my early alarm clock this morning. Hisashi shot awake from the vibrations coming from his shirt pocket. He looked over to see the television paused on the home screen of the movie that they were watching earlier. Hisashi snapped his heads back to see both of the boys were curled around each other on the pull-out couch bed, surrounded by Izuku's dog and Sho's cats. Hisashi turned his attention back on the phone and slid to answer it immediately after noticing who was calling. Hey Sho. How's it going? He asked as he slowly got up from the recliner in order to not disturb the cuddle pile in front of him. He crept down the hallway as he waited for an answer. We might finish a bit earlier than expected, Aizawa replied. We have it planned out for tomorrow morning. Everything is in order. That's great. How's Nem? There was a brief pause on the other end with some background noises muffled over the phone. She says to tell Izuku she says hi and that she misses him and loves him. She also says that she wanted any pictures you have taken. I was already going to send them, Hisashi retorted back. And I'll be sure to pass both of your messages. What do you mean both? Hisashi snorted right as he entered their shared bedroom to have some more privacy to take the phone call. Sho, I know you miss both of them right now, since you're a big ol' softie. Are they doing okay? Hisashi smiled as he answered. Hitachi and Izuku both miss you. And they are currently sleeping on the pull-out couch with their bodyguard surrounding them to provide them warmth. Why in the couch instead of an actual bed? Aizawa asked. Says the guy who prefers his sleeping bag, Hisashi thought briefly to himself. They fell asleep while watching a movie, Hisashi admitted, peeking his head out in the hall to briefly listen to the soft breaths of both of the young boys, with the blue light coming from the television peeking out into the hallway. So if everything goes well, you should be over before the end of tomorrow like planned. That sounds good, Hisashi changed the subject back to the main topic. Yeah, as always said. But don't tell Izuku because Nimuri wants to surprise him. Got it. Won't tell a soul, Hisashi promised with a cross over his heart even if his partner couldn't see him over the phone call. See you tomorrow show. Love you. As always sighed, see you Hisashi. Hisashi heard a small grumble of "and love you too" that was poorly disguised by a cough before the phone call ended. Itsuki and Izuku at the arcade. After spending time with Uncle Hisashi and Hitachi, Izuku was dropped off to spend the day with his oldest friend, Kaken. Hisashi dropped him off right at the location that Aunt Mitsuki told him to, while Hitachi was still sleeping back at the apartment. They pulled up to an arcade that recently opened the laser tag arena. The Bakugo family was waiting outside by the door with Kitsuki steadily looking out into the street for him. Izuku said goodbye to Hisashi and hopped out of the car to join his friend outside the arcade. Finally, what took you so long? Izuku paused and looked back at where his uncle had driven off. Traffic. Whatever, Bakugo shrugged before grabbing Izuku's wrist. Let's try out the claw machine first. I think this arcade has really big hero figures. Really? Izuku asked, his eyes widening. Kitsuki led him inside with Mitsuki and Masaru following behind them. Mitsuki traveled with them to the claw machines with some quarters ready, while Masaru went to get game tokens from the employee behind the prize desk. Mitsuki tried out the claw machine first and tried to aim for the All Might plush figure. He tried again and failed. Izuku tried after Kitsuki tried about 5 times to get the plush. Izuku aimed for the same toy so he could give it to his friend if he got it, but he didn't. He was able to move it into the air before the plush's arm slipped from the claw's grasp. Masaru came over with the extra tokens to see Kitsuki trying to hide his struggle as he aimed for his prize. "Can I try it out?" Masaru asked, pushing up his glasses on his nose. Kitsuki shrugged, "Yeah. Go ahead, Pops." Masaru nodded gratefully to his son who moved out of the way of the claw machine to allow his father to handle the controls. Izuku backed up so he could watch the older man have his turn at the machine. To their surprise, Masaru won the plush in only 2 more tries. When Kitsuki asked how he did that so fast, Masaru smiled, "I have my ways." The next game the two friends tried was a dancing game with 4 squares on the ground that pointed in different directions. When Izuku put the coin in the slot, Kitsuki went to work on finding a song to dance to. The first song they danced to was an All Might theme song from a short cartoon based on the hero. Kitsuki placed first with 100 points more than Izuku. The next round went to Izuku purely because he chose a song that his mom often exercised to, so he knew the rhythm by heart. They tied on the last song, which was an accidental press on a semi-popular pop song that the game had in its roster. After all that dancing, Masaru went to order some food for them, while Mitsuki watched over the boys as they continued to play arcade games and win prizes from them. After they all ate, Mitsuki pointed out a laser tag area for the boys. Kitsuki immediately looked towards Izuku with a confident grin on his face to find that his friend was returning the look knowingly. So Bakugo's parents went to the little mini golf course, while the boys went straight towards the laser tag area. They both got dressed in matching color vests and equipped themselves with the laser guns attached to the vest with a coiled cord. They listened carefully as the instructor told them about the rules and the assigned area for both of the color teams. When the instructions were over, they looked at each other before taking off through the open door to find a good vantage point to hide and shoot others on their side of the area. They only had a 1-minute head start to get themselves settled in before the signal for the 7-minute-long battle started. Kitsuki immediately began firing with Izuku following his lead while calling out to him about the opponents and where they were running to. It didn't take long for them to be spotted despite their greatest efforts, and Izuku was shot with a laser from the opposite team. "I'm hit, avenge me," Izuku called out dramatically, hiding behind the wall to wait until the vest stops vibrating from the hit. Kitsuki fired at the opponent who shot Izuku. "Take this, loser." The 7 minutes went a lot quicker than either of them expected. But the long battle was worth it when Izuku saw the smile on Kitsuki's face when he realized that he got the most points out of the whole team. By the time their tickets ran out, Masaru was calling the two of them over so they could leave before it got dark. Kitsuki groaned while Izuku just grabbed his hand to drag him back to the entrance, where Aunt Mitsuki was waiting for them. Uncle Masaru was holding their prizes that they won with the tickets and the plushies from the claw machine. Mitsuki opened the door to allow both of the young boys outside, while Masaru speed walked to the exit. Izuku looked around the parking spaces only to see a familiar figure start walking up from in between 2 parked cars. The figure was sporting a small white bandage on their cheek. "Mama," Izuku called out cheerfully. He was about to run up to his mother before stopping himself to check both ways across the street. Nimuri laughed when Izuku ran straight towards her after checking. Nimuri kissed his head. "I missed you." "I missed you too," Izuku said while rubbing his face into her neck. "There weren't any problems?" Nimuri questioned with her arms still wrapped around her son. No problems at all with your kid, Mitsuki said before glancing back at her husband, Masaru, can you send? Already on it, Masaru interrupted softly, holding up his phone screen to show that he had already sent the picture with both of their boys playing in the arcade. The stuffed animals and toys were stuffed under his arms, with Mitsuki now holding on to the biggest one to help him with a number of prizes. Namuri smiled at her son that was still giddy from the excitement of the arcade. Did you have fun? Lots of fun, Izuku retorted happily. Well, that's good. Namuri brushed the flyaway strands of hair from her face. Thanks for watching over him for the day. It was our pleasure, Masaru answered. Mitsuki nodded her head towards the sky. Now you might want to hurry back before it gets too dark. The traffic shouldn't be too bad around this time. Right. We'll be on your way, Namuri replied. Aye, Kachin, Izuku said loudly with a big wave and a bright smile on his face. Hakan yelled out, "Aye, Izuku." Namuri waved at the Bakugos before making her way back to her sleek car, waiting for them in the parking space where she left it. And when they got home, Miku was waiting for both of them to arrive before pouring on Namuri as soon as she came through the door to attack her face in puppy kisses. Izuku laughter filled the room while Namuri struggled to lock the door behind her. Time skip training. Come on, you got this, Hisashi was encouraged as his son and nephew ran through the obstacle course in the gym. He had a stereo playing with upbeat music to set the pace of the exercise. Come on, Hitachi, Izuku laughed as he ran in front of his cousin. He looked behind him to see Hitachi trying to keep up behind him in the mats. You're falling behind. Not for long, Hitachi shouted back, bouncing on a small trampoline to launch himself on an elevated platform to chase after him on higher ground. Izuku's curly hair had been twisted into a small braid to keep his hair out of his face. Hitashi's hair had been pulled back with a headband to keep it out of his face as they trained through the gymnastics-inspired obstacle course in the gym. Izuku looked back at Hitachi once again to see how fast he charged forward with a fierce grin on his face. The purple-haired teen threw himself forward to land on a trampoline which rocketed his body farther ahead. Hitachi glanced behind him for a quick moment to face his cousin and shout, "Now who's falling behind?" Hisashi watched as the two teens have changed through the years. They just had one more year before applying to UA. Hitachi ended up winning the area which made Izuku tackle him as soon as he got close into a stronghold that brought them both to the ground. After the obstacle course, Aizawa got them set up in the area with more Parker-centric walls and poles. Aizawa instructed them as they jumped onto walls to bounce off to land on the horizontal or vertical poles placed around. Izuku swung himself over the top of the tall wall to land on the tilted side of the other side, while Hitachi jumped over the stacked foam boxes. Izuku called Hitachi up, who bounced between the two closely placed walls to join Izuku on the top. They both jumped down onto a medium-sized structure just to practice how to recover from a fall safely, with Aizawa watching their every move. When they both finally made it back down to the floor, Hisashi was making his way towards them with the music from the stereo he was carrying following him. Wait, turn around. Your hair got loose again. Hitachi used this break time to pull back his hair again with his headband. He slipped it off his head before pushing it back down and pulling it up over his face. He turned to Izuku as Hisashi had the hair tie on his wrist. Do you plan to cut it before UA? Maybe a trim. But I kind of like how long it is, Izuku answered, while Hisashi worked quickly to tighten his hair into a braid. He finished it off with the hair tie. And you're all good, Hisashi said happily, throwing 2 thumbs up. Izuku thanked him before he turned back when Aizawa cleared his throat. Aizawa gestured his hand over to the water fountain. Take a water break before you head to the pole bars. Hitachi walked towards the water fountain before Izuku made it an impromptu race to the water. Then it was just the two of them racing against each other to see who will get to the drinking fountain first. Hisashi sighed, things never change, huh? They always make some sort of completion every time we end up here. Their fighting skills have changed immensely from how they began. And I can only see that they will keep improving, Aizawa scratched the back of his neck. Wow, that's high praise from you, Hisashi said with a teasing grin on his face. Are you soft just for them? Aizawa pushed against him as Hisashi laughed in response. Shut up, he said without any true heat behind his words. He looked back to see the two boys gulping down the water by the drinking fountain, with Hitachi bent further down to drink from the small fountain. He knew he was already soft for them, he didn't need Hisashi to point it out. Over the past years, as Izuku improves with his quirk, he trains with different weapon styles until he finds one that fits with his quirk the most. His main weapon of choice was a whip because of how he could influence the flow of the weapon and how it reminded him of his mother's own whip. Another weapon that he used was a ribbon because of how similar it was to a whip, although it didn't have the same impact. It worked more like Aizawa's capture scarf when he trained with it. But he could also use it for distraction by using the telekinesis to contort the material in different ways. Izuku fiddled around with the idea of using it to comfort victims. And the final one he was currently training with was a steel fan. The idea came to him through a movie where a character blocked a knife and sword attack by using the fan. The character used it like a shield and let the sword pierce through just for them to disarm the villain easily with a flick of their hand. And so, Izuku was training with a whip in UA's spare training ground while his mother attended a meeting while the students were out for the day. Bakugo was invited as well, practicing the moves he came up with on Cementus's walls that he made to help them train. Izuku used his telekinesis to manipulate the whip to strike against the wall multiple times until it sliced pieces of the wall off. He looked to where Bakugo had exploded the walls to catch his gaze on a big stone. Izuku flicked the whip towards the stone to wrap around the piece of cement. He started to twirl while using his telekinesis to keep everything in place. As soon as he got close enough, the stone slammed into the cement wall, causing more damage, while Bakugo continued to blast away at the cement behind him. "Thank you for giving me some ammo, Kaken." "Shut up." Izuku laughed in response before turning around to watch Bakugo perform a new attack. He cupped his hand around his palm and delivered a very precise explosion through the wall like an almost perfect circle. "Wow, what was that move called?" "AP shot," Bakugo replies, flexing his hand. "I've had the idea in my head for a while. Good thing these stupid walls are here to test it out." "Yeah, I wouldn't want you practicing at your house again," Izuku responded. He used his telekinesis to take him off the ground to float above his childhood friend. Bakugo had turned around quickly to hit him only to see that Izuku was already floating. He raised a singular eyebrow unimpressed before smirking. He used his hands to propel himself up using an explosion. "Thought you could get away in the air?" "Nope. Nope. Nope." Izuku changed as he twirled in the air, escaping Bakugo's grasp. He kept dodging Bakugo's quick explosions that were rocketing him towards Izuku. Bakugo chased after him through the air. "Hold still, Dumbus. You can't catch me, Kaken," Izuku yelled out to his friend, reminiscent of a childish taunt. He would come to regret those words when he was too slow to dodge and Bakugo's hand was gripping his shirt. Nowhere to run now. Midnight, who had just finished up the faculty meeting, walked outside to see her son flailing in the air as his childhood friend tried to fight him. She sighed, well, at least they haven't fallen to the ground yet. And yet she spoke too soon as she was strolling up to the area. She could see her son losing his concentration on his quirk just from his expression. All of a sudden the two boys fell through the air for a brief moment before Bakugo used his explosions to soften their landing. "Dumbus, stop losing your focus," Bakugo groaned. "Huh?" Izuku raised his head up from the ground. Bakugo flicked his forehead in response and snickered when Izuku raised his hand to his forehead to protect the area from another small attack. "Ow." Midnight chuckled, "Alright. Training's done for today." "Oh, really? Well, we could go back home and you two can continue with your yoga lessons," Midnight grinned. Bakugo straightened up. "I'm good. You can drop me off." "Kaken," Izuku pouted at his friend. Bakugo rubbed the back of his neck. "What?" "I have homework I need to do." Izuku pouted harder, staring right into Bakugo's unimpressed red eyes until he groaned again. "Fine. Stupid yoga it is." While Bakugo was standing up, Izuku glanced back at his mom with a proud glint in his eyes. When Bakugo looked back at him, Izuku used his telekinesis to hurriedly pull himself up from the ground. After a long school day that week, Momo invited her three friends back to her house to do their homework. And now they were all outside in the grass with snacks to help their studies. And it didn't take long to finish their homework when all four of them were helping each other with the subjects they were struggling in. And when it was all finished, they ate their snacks and played around in the soft grass. Izuku used his telekinesis to move Momo in the air softly. "Let me know if this is the feeling that all the princesses feel when they get lifted up by the male love interest. I feel more like I'm being carried to the main character by the intelligent wizard of the group," Momo admitted as she floated in the air. "It does look more like that," Shoto commented from his spot in the tree's shade as he leaned back against the tree bark. "That feels more accurate," Izuku replied before letting her down gently into the grass. "By the way, how was the novel you were reading? The one with the aliens or the one about the girl taking over the world with machines?" "The Machine Queen," Izuku clarified. "Right, oh my goodness, do you remember her new friend she made that I told you about? They betrayed her to the people in charge." Izuku made an exaggerated gasp. "What?" Shoto leaned forward from the tree trunk he was leaning against, the one who she actually trusted. "Yes," Momo called out in frustration. "Right as I thought I could believe that they were going to be best friends against the world, they disappointed me. But wait, what if they were forced into it?" Iida piped up from where he was observing. He pushed his glasses up. "It makes more sense, since most of the book tropes do that with that kind of plotline." "I don't think it's like that," Momo added with a spark in her eyes, thinking about the last chapter's dialogue. "I'm going to keep reading and update you three about it." The bird flies down from the tree and starts to peck at the ground near Shoto, which makes him freeze up in order to not scare them away by any student movements. "Please do." "I'm on the edge of my seat," Shoto remarked blankly as the bird flew back up in the tree with a stick in its beak. "I might have to read the book when I have enough time," Iida commented. Momo floated down with grace with Izuku's telekinesis helping her land softly. She smiled happily at Ida. I can give you my copy once I'm done with it. I can even stop myself from spoiling the ending, so I wouldn't ruin the reading experience for you. Izuku turned to Shoto with a mischievous smile on his face, while his attention was drawn to the bird trying to make their nest. You're next. Whoa, Shoto remarked as he was dragged into the air by his feet. This isn't how I thought my day was going. Hayama Izuku, age 14, quirk, telekinesis, emotion-based quirk. Can move things with mind, but strongly connected more with emotions. The stronger the feeling, the more powerful his reach of power is. And positive and negative emotions affect the output greatly. The power output of the quirk is affected by the user's physical and mental strength. So it stalls or decreases when the user loses focus concentration, is too tired, sleep deprived, or is ill. When young, the user could only carry a certain amount of weight according to their body weight and muscle strength. Depending on the current strength of the user, the quirk can lift up so much more, especially with the addition of the emotions helping fuel the power. Overuse of quirk will cause headaches, migraines or nausea. The user must be concentrated, if not the telekinesis will stop working. If the user is not paying attention directly to the object they are using their quirk on, the object will stop floating or will start bouncing in air from quirk stalling. Able to manipulate certain gases in the air like Midnight's quirk. However, quirk can only push gases away to a certain point, not get rid of them entirely. It works better with solid objects and sometimes liquid. With practice, telekinesis can manipulate a small flame such as a candle flame into a ribbon in the air. Strong possibility comes from the father's side. If the user undergoes extreme negative feelings such as fear, the quirk will go out of control, causing the user's hair and eyes to change into a lighter color. It will cause the user to be almost completely unresponsive towards any outside stimuli. The quirk will wreak havoc, using the user as a body instead of the user having control of said quirk. Hero costume must get support items with hero costume to help with emotion control. A belt to store first aid for rescue and small items to use with telekinesis. Inspired by Midnight's colors. Has support items to help with quirk and balance emotions. Lightweight material, but not as flows to prevent anyone from yanking on the flows material. Maybe something like a bodysuit underneath pants like Hawk's. Something like a halter bodysuit or long-sleeved. Possibly something like a style like Midnight to make the villains underestimate what he has up his sleeve. To give the advantage on his side. Meeting someone in the park, outside of school, and under a tunnel. Emiko didn't really know when to drop the smile she was using as her classmate skipped ahead of her while walking past. Even when they were out of sight, she still kept the grin on her face while trying to keep her hair out of her face since it kept getting caught in her mouth. She walked further and further until she ended up in a park. She didn't know how long she walked, but it did look like she walked a long way away from her house. She really didn't want to go home to parents who only started to accept her when she was acting normal. One slip up with mentioning blood and she was immediately met with a long talk about acting like other girls her age. She blew air out of her mouth, relaxing her face that was hurting from how much smiling and fake laughing she had to do during the day with the other girls in her class. While she strolled through the park, she ended up bumping into someone with a very prestigious school uniform on. She didn't have time to realize where they were from until she tripped on her shoelaces and ended up on the ground. Hey, are you okay? She heard as the stranger extended his hand down to her. She looked up to see someone who looked almost exactly like her school crush but different. He didn't have that sharp jawline and stubborn look in his eyes. Instead, this stranger had longer hair that was a nice green color like a jade or an emerald shade. The same color as the wide eyes that were staring back at her with concern. He had freckles decorating his face and a nice flush to his cheeks from the blood rushing under his skin. She grasped his hand without thinking about it, standing back up with his help. I'm just peachy. Thanks. Are you sure about that? Because from all the classes I have taken in body language, you look like something's wrong, the boy rambled on, looking worried. I didn't hurt you anywhere, right? I have a mini first aid kit in my school bag in case you skinned your knee. Geez, you really don't drop the subject like other people I know, Toga replied. She dusted off her skirt and pulled it back to reveal that she didn't skin her knees at all from the fall. It's one of my defining features or flaws, the boy commented as he checked to make sure she wasn't injured in any way. He rubbed the back of his neck. Depends on who you ask. Toga raised an eyebrow, and who are you? My name is Kayama Izuku. And you are? I'm Toga Himiko. Nice to meet ya. Toga stuck her hand out to shake his, reveling in the warmth of his hand. She found herself staring at one of his veins and focusing on a bandage wrapped around his finger. Did he get a paper cut or something? She wondered how dark his blood was. What brings you around here since the uniform is from that big fancy schmancy school uptown? Oh, I'm visiting my friend, Kayama smiled happily. He goes to another school, so I made the trip here to see him. Toga's eyes wandered to his face, and before she knew it she was picturing his freckles speckled with blood. He looked almost like the boy she really liked back at her school, but more pretty instead of rugged. But with a bit of blood, he would look even cooler. Hey, Kayama-kun. Kayama looked up from where he was fiddling with his tie to make it looser around his neck. Yes. I think you would look really cool with blood on you, Toga commented, still daydreaming about blood replacing his freckled cheeks. And once she said it, her eyes widened. Crap, Toga thought to herself as the words came rushing out of her mouth. Damn, now he's going to run away. Kayama stared back at her and blinked in surprise. Thank you. That was a strange compliment, but I will take it. No one has ever said that to me before. That's it. Toga blinked out of surprise to see that the boy was still standing there. You aren't going to say anything about me being weird? Or run off? Why would it be weird? It kind of felt like a compliment, Kayama shrugged. Like I just pictured one of those action stars that have a bit of blood on them and it makes them look tough. Exactly, Toga threw up her arms. No one takes it that way when I say it. I even try to say they looked cute with it on, but they never understood. Kayama tilted his head like a confused puppy. Have you explained what you meant before? Yes, but they think I'm just messing with them or just acting out on purpose. Or just think it's because of my quirk, Toga explained, gesturing wildly with her hands as she talked. Finally she found someone who understood what she meant. Kayama looked curious. Well, what is it? I have a blood quirk, Toga explained after a pause in the air. She slightly tensed, waiting for his new reaction to be one of disgust. It lets me transform into anyone using their blood. Really? She diverted her attention away from him as she thought, and here comes the disgust. That sounds so cool, Kayama exclaimed with an excited grin. What? Yeah, I never met another person with a blood quirk before, Kayama replied with an easygoing smile. I know Vlad King has one. But blood quirks are rare to find, I think, at least in Japan. I heard there were a lot more blood type quirks in Europe. And you're okay with it? Toga asks, carefully fearing that he would just revoke his statement as soon as she showed the hope in her face. Kayama answered quickly while pulling out his phone. Why wouldn't I? Blood quirks are so under the radar that I haven't learned that much about them yet. His eyes widened as soon as he stared at the screen. Oh, I have to go now if I actually want to surprise him. Kayama shoved his phone back in his pocket. Have to run, bye Toga. She waved back as he ran out of the park to go and reunite with his friend. Wow, that Kayama guy looked a lot like my crush. But he seemed so much softer and nicer than him, she pouted as she talked out loud once he was fully out of sight. She crossed her arms and leaned back against the bark of the tree. I bet he wouldn't make such a fuss about spilling blood. Odd, she desperately wanted to know if Kayama would actually accept her, since he showed genuine concern for her, even when she put up the facade that everyone around her fell for. Maybe if they run into each other again, it will be fate pushing her towards him. Izuku couldn't wait until next year since that is when the UA entrance exam was. But he was still a third year in middle school, so he had a long way to go. Izuku waited outside Aldera Middle School for Bakugo because he had a study hall for the last period. He decided to leave the school early with a mental note to do double work during cleaning time next week to make up for it. So now there he was waiting for his friend to finish up cleaning and come out. While waiting, a few students noticed him since he was wearing a different school uniform than the rest of them. That signified he was enrolled in one of the elite schools. Who do you think he is waiting on? Does he have a girlfriend here or a boyfriend? He is kind of cute. What is he doing? Isn't his school like miles from here? Izuku ignored them as he checked his phone with his school bag leaning off one of his shoulders. Mount Lady apparently made her debut earlier today by popping into Kamui Wood's fight against a villain. He waited until he heard the familiar stomping footsteps up ahead, followed by a surprised grunt. He looked up to see Bakugo staring back at him with an unreadable expression that faded into a smirk. Izuku, what the hell are you doing here? Bakugo yelled out, stomping over to him. Izuku met him halfway while Bakugo's groupies walked ahead, looking behind them to see how different Bakugo was acting around this new kid that they haven't really seen before. The groupies walked off past the gate once they knew that Bakugo wasn't going to follow after them to hang out. I know you didn't forget about our planned weekend, bombshell, Izuku replied, dragging Bakugo by the hand towards the gate. I know Auntie must be cooking up something really good. Bakugo shook off his hand once they passed the gate. Ha, I'm the one mostly doing the cooking tonight, so you can slow down. The two continued their walk, not really rushing to their destination, while Izuku chatted about what happened at his school. Along the way, the two stopped by a vending machine for a drink with Izuku getting a vanilla cream soda and Bakugo getting a cherry flavor. So like you know how like Tenya, Shoto and Momo are like in the top 5 smartest kids in our class? Izuku asked, already knowing that Bakugo would remember even though Bakugo never really used their actual names when referring to them. Yeah, you're like the 5th one in the class, Bakugo said, chugging down a can of soda. Right, Izuku nodded along as he waved his own soda in the air. He took 2 long sips before continuing, anyway, we had this test, so we all decided to play a prank on the other students. Bakugo raised an eyebrow as he swallowed the soda in his mouth, even stick in the mud. Enya was a bit hesitant until I said it would help with motivating our other peers to study harder. After that, he was okay with it. Izuku paused to take a drink. So when the test came out, each one of us pretended we didn't know a single question. Like Shoto dragged a hand down his face for the dramatics. I took a glance around that room and everyone looked scared as hell. Heh. Bakugo took one long last sip of his soda until there was no more liquid left in it. Have you done something like that? Izuku tilted his head forward to stare directly at Bakugo's face while he asked. Since you are the top scorer in your classroom, I imagine you would have fun seeing those extras' faces. Ha. No, Bakugo replied while he crushed his empty soda can into a metal disc. Izuku straightened up as they continued walking while Bakugo threw the disc like a frisbee into a trash can. But I did burn one Dumbus's pants for trying to copy off my test answers. Hayama laughed at his reply as they started to walk right under a tunnel that would lead back to Bakugo's house through the downtown Musatafu area. And yet they were barely halfway through the tunnel when two eyes appeared out of the darkness above them with a chilling chuckle. MMHM, a good skin disguise. The good what now? Izuku shouted right before the large green figure dropped down onto the ground, dragging Kayama into its jelly-like body. His half-full soda can clattered to the ground, leaking onto the cement as Bakugo stared in shock for a moment. Damn, you let him go before I blow you into bits, Bakugo shouted, firing off controlled blasts around the smelly goo, trying not to hit Izuku who was struggling in the middle. Hayama reached forward with his hands to push through the squishy consistency. Using his telekinesis, he pushed away chunks so he could get his hand to the surface. While Bakugo defended himself against a villain who was reaching for him as well. Bakugo reaches forward to grab Kayama's hand only for the villainous glob to reach at his face, grabbing at his mouth. Bakugo pulled Kayama with one hand as he aimed his other hand to create an explosion right into the villain's eyes. Kayama choked on the fresh air once his face broke free from the sludge as his friend wrenched him free. With a shout, the villain let go of Kayama and Bakugo. Kayama fell into Bakugo before redirecting his attention to the villain in front of them with no hero in sight. You damn kids, the villain stated, crawling forward quickly. Kayama raised his hands and used his quirk to push the villain away from them into the far wall of the above-ground tunnel. Izuku gritted his teeth while Bakugo rushed to the side to weaken the villain, who was desperately trying to escape against his hold with explosions to his vulnerable eyes. Do not fear, Kayama looked to the side to see a blast of white and yellow practically flying past him. Bakugo dove out of the way as All Might reeled his fist back to punch the villain into bits. For I am here, All Might shouted as the villain's bits lay scattered under the tunnel, the light coming in from both sides, illuminating just how many pieces were scattered. Bakugo and Kayama watched as All Might quickly pulled out a 2-liter bottle from his pockets, emptied it out, and pushed the villain into it to hold him captive inside the plastic. Hey All Might, Kayama rushed forward while Bakugo was rising from the ground, his book bag scattered on the ground a few feet away from where Kayama's school bag was lying open. You came right on time. All Might's eyes squinted for a moment before he recognized the green hair. It had been so long since he had seen Midnight Sun. Ah, young Kayama, I almost did not recognize you. What are you doing here? Are you alright? I'm fine, Izuku reassured him with a smile. I was just walking with my friend when the Soge guy attacked both of us. Oh, thank you for saving both of us. That's good to hear. And hello to you, young man, All Might greeted the blonde teenager who was still gathering both of their scattered school supplies and school bags from the dirty tunnel floor. Can I get your autograph? Izuku stated, holding up Bakugo's notebook that escaped from his school bag in the attack. Kayama glanced over to see Bakugo watching in silent enjoyment as his favorite hero signed his notebook. Izuku pushed the notebook back into Bakugo's hands, who was undoubtedly silently freaking out on the inside from having the number one hero's autograph in his notebook but was hiding it behind his usual scowl. Bakugo sucked his teeth while he gently closed the notebook. TCH. Are either of you hurt? All Might asked quickly, looking over the two boys. Nah, Izuku coughed a bit from the scratchiness of his throat. I might need a cough drop though when I get to Auntie's house. Well, if either of you feel strange, report to a doctor straight away, All Might said, making sure the villain bottle was secured inside his pocket. Kayama watched as the older man bent his knees a bit while keeping the same bright smile on his face. Well then, I'll be off to give this villain to the authorities. All Might, Kayama waved brightly as Bakugo gave a half-hearted salute towards the retreating hero. He turned to his friend with a somber expression. I hope any type of pudding or jello is not dessert. Because that guy tasted like rotten jello, if it could even be rotten. You don't have to worry about that, Kitsuki stated as they continued to walk back to Bakugo's house. They were passing by a building on a corner street when Bakugo suddenly thought out loud, didn't you want an autograph too? Hayama shook his head, nah, I already got one from him a few years ago. Hayama turned his head towards him in confusion as to why Bakugo went silent before Bakugo slowly turned his head towards him with a scowl. And you didn't tell me? Bakugo yelled. Wait, what? Izuku replied as Bakugo started charging ahead of him. He rushed to catch up to his friend. I thought I did. Did I not? Kakin. After they got back to Bakugo's house, Bakugo shouted out how Izuku was keeping secrets, while Kayama returned his quip with how they both got attacked by a villain. Kayama made both of Bakugo's parents whip their head to them and immediately rushed to both of them to check on them. Mitsuki checked over Kayama, while Masaru rushed to check Bakugo's temperature with the back of his hand. Masaru rushed to ask questions to his son who was scowling under the attention. It took a lot of reassurance from Kayama that they were safe and that All Might had saved them to get both of them to back off from their worries. They both settled in the living room before it was time to start making dinner. Kitsuki stood up to start working on dinner with his mother, while Masaru cleaned up with Izuku's help. Dinner was hamburger steak, rice, boiled vegetables, udon noodles, and miso soup. Kitsuki grinned victoriously as Kayama choked on the spice of the steak, seeking the comfort of white rice to quell the unexpected spice. Izuku kicked his foot under the table, which sparked a foot fight while they ate dinner. After dinner, Kitsuki and Izuku settle into his bedroom to watch an American All Might movie with Japanese subtitles. The party. Kayama Namuri had been invited to hero parties once she debuted. When he was young, Izuku was watched over by Aizawa when she went to the parties as her hero identity, Midnight. There were multiple types like hero galas, banquet parties to have charity auctions, and smaller parties to give our awards that were different from the hero ranking parties that happened every year. Each one has a gathering of press to capture the heroes wearing the costumes or wearing more formal wear for the fans to enjoy. Most of the time, Izuku was having a sleepover with Hitachi as Midnight was wearing formal dresses at the formal gatherings. With only 6 months left until the entrance exam, Izuku was practicing his moves every day to fine-tune them. In the middle of one of his practice sessions, Midnight received an email invitation from her PR agent about a charity auction party coming up featuring heroes and their chosen charities. Midnight looked down at the email, reading it over to see what exactly she would be attending. Izuku, do you want to have a sleepover at Hitachi's next weekend? Izuku looked up to her while the couch remained floating in the air. Miku was barking at the floating object, wagging their tail as they tried to bite at the cushions. Is it a mission or one of those parties? Another charity auction, Kayama answered. She set down the phone to tighten her ponytail more. They want me to be a guest. Mom, Izuku called out. Kayama looked up at the young green-haired teen who was slowly setting the couch back on the floor. Miku jumped on the cushions as soon as it was back on the ground. Yes. What is it? Can I come this time? Izuku asked. Kayama's eyes widened. You want to come with me? I mean, if it's okay, I would like to, Izuku responded. It could be good practice in the future for when I deal with the press as a hero. I could practice my public speaking in that way. I do have an opportunity to bring a guest. But I will need to brief you on what happens each time. The flashing cameras, the barrage of questions they might ask, and the way to act once you are inside the venue, Kayama listed each thing off with her fingers. And I need to find you a formal suit along with a dress. Kayama paused as she thought about something from the way she looked off to the side towards her bedroom. Izuku looked at where she was staring only to see the hallway. And just like that, Izuku had double the training. On training sessions for his quirk and fighting skills that have been harnessed throughout the years. And another session per day for getting ready for his first public appearance since the television show interview when he was freshly adopted. The public couldn't get a hold of him or picture of him since that time. And his mother talked about him sparingly to the press when they asked about him. When he was practicing his balance, his mother was barraging him with questions that the press might ask him. When he was trying to focus to float all of the couch cushions at once, his mother was flashing light in his eyes to prepare him for the cameras and bright lights that would be there. And with a week until the charity party, Kayama picked him up after school to go directly to a formal dress shop to buy their clothes for the event. He walked in wearing his school uniform, while his mom wore her civilian clothes. Kayama decided to find a dress first, then they would find something for him to wear that would match the color. So he followed his mom through the dress aisles to find dresses for her to try on. He picked out a red one that had a sparkly fabric, while she shrugged before kicking up a dark orange ombre gown. After both of their arms were filled with layers of different colored fabric, they carried the dresses over to the waiting room to a frantic worker, helping them find a big empty room. Izuku sat outside the room on a little bench as his mother started to try on the dresses they had picked out. You have to make sure to answer the questions you are okay with. If you don't like the question, don't react. They want a reaction whether it be bad or actually good. Don't give them any facial expression, Kayama instructed through the closed door as the fabric of the dress rustled. I have some exercises at home that will master your poker face. What kind of questions do they ask? Izuku questioned, leaning his head back against the wall behind him. Well, in my case, most of them are hexual. And I really hope they won't corner you with those types, Kayama made a disinterested noise behind the door. If they do, tell me and I'll deal with them very personally. Kayama sighed as the sound of a zipper filled the space around them. But most likely they will ask if you are going to be a hero like me, what hero school you might going to, if you even want to be a hero, and etc. She opened the door to show off the dark orange dress she picked out first. The dark orange started at the top until it faded into a more light orange at the bottom. It had a bit of ruffles at the bottom, but the empire waist style didn't quite fit her top half. Anyway, what do you think? I don't really like the color on you, Izuku commented on part of Uncle Masaru's teachings about fashion powering his thoughts. And the shape isn't really nice. Yeah, I was thinking that too. Kayama shoved down the ruffles at the bottom and adjusted the top of it to look into the mirror on the wall in the room. Onto something better. You picked out the red one, right? Yep, Izuku confirmed excitedly. Kayama picked up the fabric of the dress bottom so she could walk easier back inside the dressing room, then I'll try on that one next. And just like she promised, she strutted out of the dress room 2 minutes afterwards in the red dress that Izuku had picked out. The dress was a mermaid style with sparkles all down the fabric and a v-neck with adjustable straps. I really like this one. But I do have a critique, Kayama shuffled forward. It's a bit tight on my leg so I can't move that fast. How fast can you walk in it? His mother gave him an answer by shuffling towards him while the fabric made a rustling sound against the floor. He stifled a laugh while she laughed loudly about it. So yeah, I'm guessing this one goes into the no pile. I think I'll go with the green one next. His mother came out of the dressing room shortly after hearing several grunts as she presumably struggled to get it inside. The dress was an elegant A-line dress in emerald green that draped down into a small ball gown shape. Oh, the green one does not fit right at all, Kayama said while crossing her arms over the top of the dress. Izuku moves to stand up, do you need me to get a bigger size? Don't bother, Kayama waved off his offer. I think it was the last one in my size. Plus, I don't really like it. The shade is beautiful, but the way it fits my body is weird. When his mother came out, it was in a blue gown that she picked out that had one shoulder. The dress was a light blue color with lace overlaid on the torso with tulle at the bottom. Hey, Mom? Izuku questioned as she frowned at the mirror, adjusting the dress by tugging the fabric down. His mother glanced back at him. What happens to the dresses you have already worn? Oh, I donate them to women's shelters because my PR agent doesn't want me to show up in the same thing twice, Kayama explained as she gazed at the gown on her. She picked at the lace that had a loose thread hanging off the top. And since I'm not going to wear theirs again, I'll give it somewhere where it can be put to good use. Really? Yeah. But one time, I got a dress that was versatile, so I got like 3 wears out of it before I donated it. I was just changing up the straps or adding something to it to make it look different, Kayama admitted. I did dye it on my last wear to really throw the press off since they were hinting in on the fact. Why is wearing the same dress a bad thing? No idea. But I have seen one of the men wear the same exact black suit for years. All he has to do is wear a different shirt, Kayama explained. Speaking of, we might reuse the same jacket and pants that you have already, but we need to get it cleaned. Ah yes, the suit that Izuku had because of Uncle Masaru. He remembers only a month ago when 2 models had cancelled before a photoshoot to show off Uncle Masaru's new designs. So he was roped in with Katsuki to fill in the positions for the day to model off 2 well-made suits. And it was simultaneously fun and stressful because of how fast-paced it was. But after they had finished, Uncle Masaru let him keep the suit and jacket that he had modeled in. It was a nice shade of charcoal black that made his green hair stand out a lot more. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door opening. He looked up to see his mother dressed in a purple dress that looked like a royal ball gown. It was an off-the-shoulder dress that looked like it was made from satin. It had a small train at the back with a ball gown look to it. You look so pretty in this one, Mom, Izuku commented, looking at every detail of the dress. Really? Kayama smiled as her eyes fell onto the mirror. Ooh, I love it. She moved her hands down the sides and found her hand slipping into a hidden space. Oh, it has pockets. Izuku asked, is this the one? Most likely, but I do have one more to try on, Kayama said, twirling around in the dress once more before disappearing into the dressing room again. Izuku leaned back and waited until his mother came back out in a black dress. It had lace sleeves with a cutout at the chest with an open back. The dress was a dark shade of black with a tall skirt that went to her ankles that had one slit at the side. Izuku tilted his head, finding the dress to be more boring compared to the last one she had tried on. And by the look on his mother's face, she agreed. Yeah. I'm definitely going with the last purple one, Kayama smoothed down the fabric with a frown. She turned to him with a small smile. Hey, honey, go ahead and check out the men's section to find a tie and vest to match the purple. I'll change and meet you there. Izuku nodded back at her before leaving the dressing room section and walking over to find the vests. He strolled down the aisle to look at the available vests only for one to catch his attention past the altered ones or mutation quirks. The vest was a dark purple with black details that swooped around the edges. He walked closer only to find out that the vest had laces at the back, it was a corset vest. The ones he had seen online before were slowly making its way past the small audience it had. If he wore this, he would help out the designer gain more attention. Izuku, did you find anything? He turned his head to see his mother walking over with a purple dress draped over her arm. Yeah, what about this? Izuku gestured to the vest, making Kayama inspect it closer. Oh, that's one of the vests you showed me before, did you want to try it on? Izuku nodded before taking off to the dressing room. Kayama smiled before following after him, picking up a black and a purple tie for him to try with the vest. After several minutes and his mother's help with the laces, Izuku looked into the mirror outside the dressing room to see how the vest looked on him. The black appliques looked so elegant on the purple. It was perfect. And so, they left the boutique after paying 28,000 yen for the dress, the vest, and the tie. And that was left to do was get ready for the party later that week. After a whole week of preparing for the event, Izuku and Kayama arrived via chauffeur sent by her PR agent. They were both crammed into the backseat with Kayama's dress taking up the middle seat as well as her own. Izuku had his corset vest on, which took forever to lace up, with a black mask pulled over his nose. Kayama had on the purple dress she had chosen earlier that week. Her hair was down in the curly waves she usually had with a black choker around her neck. She had on her hero mask over her face as well. Izuku wore his black suit with a crisp white button-up shirt with the corset vest over it. He had a black face mask, the disposable kind, over his face to maintain a bit more privacy from the public. His shoulder-length curly hair was pulled half up to keep stray curls from falling into his eyesight. The car stopped right outside the event with the press waiting on the side to take pictures of the guests walking inside. Izuku could see the flashes of the camera following another pro hero walking inside that looked similar to Death Arms. Kayama glanced over to Izuku, last chance. There is a backstage entrance that we could go through instead. I'll be okay. You taught me everything that I need to know. Alright then. Let's head inside. They both exited the car and started walking to the public entrance, with the cameras starting to recognize who exactly was walking up. Izuku was hidden behind her as they walked until they finally got to the walkway. The cameras started to flash towards them, making him blink out of surprise until he started to get used to the bright lights. His mother's lessons with a flashlight paid off. Midnight, look over here. Who is that? Midnight, is that your adopted son? Midnight, yes, this is the same Izuku from 10 years ago or so, Kayama answered easily to the reporter who asked. Izuku nodded and grinned at the cameras. Hello. The reporters hurriedly took pictures of him and his mother next to each other, posing when the time was right. But it didn't last very long, since Kayama was making her way towards the entrance while their pictures were being taken. Izuku waved to the cameras with his mother before heading straight through the doors. Kayama breathed in as soon as they were safely inside, away from the cameras. She leaned over to her son to whisper under her breath, and now we can enjoy food and donate to some charities. It's so crowded in here, Izuku commented, following after her while avoiding running into people on the way. Uncle Zawa would not like this kind of scene. Yeah. I don't really mind it, but I basically only come to these kinds of events to keep my image up, Kayama replied quietly to him. The small smile on her face grew into something more mischievous. She whispered, but I get to tell them all the juicy details when I get back home. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.